Well, hello and welcome to ILoveGay today. And we are here in a whole different world than we've touched on before. We're here in the world of wrestling and pro wrestling and the world of drag kind of merging into it. And we're here with Ry Levey and Pollo Del Mar. How are you both?
Hey, great to be here.
So
I'm very excited at any opportunity, Matt, to talk about pro wrestling.
Oh, I'm excited too, and I'll explain why. But first, you guys have come out. You've got this film that it had its kind of debut at the Toronto LGBT Film Festival, Inside Out, I believe. It's called Out in the Ring.
Yes. So we just world premiered at the beginning of June at Inside Out. Really excited that we had one of our legends there with us, Susan Green. Flew her in, and that the audience responded, and so did the jury, because we were awarded the Best Canadian Feature Film Award at the festival. Wow.
And tell us a little bit about this film. From my notes, it's kind of a bit of history and queer representation in the world of professional wrestling, but it's also something near and dear to your heart as well, right?
Yeah, so wrestling for me was part of my childhood, in that I grew up in and like Pollo, Paul, as a fan of the territories of professional wrestling, which were these kind of segmented indie locations. And I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, or around Calgary, Alberta, on Stampede Wrestling, and it was a part of my childhood that I loved. And when the time came to pursue creation of my first feature film, after years of working in film since the mid '90s, it made sense to take something that I loved and that I grew up loving, and exploring one of those things through a queer lens. Yeah. And wrestling made sense, and I totally lucked out in getting amazing people like Pollo and fantastic wrestlers like Dark Sheik and Susan Tex Green, Sunny Kiss, and be able to tell this story of the hidden history of queer representation in pro wrestling.
Wow. Well, I love it. And I will admit there's probably two main reasons why. As soon as I saw your press release, because you have the film is coming to Cinequest next month as well. And you also told me Fantasia in Montreal.
Yes, Fantasia in Montreal. Fantasia is the largest, it's officially now the largest horror cult film genre festival in the world. They get over 200,000 fans, and they line up around the street, line up the street for blocks just to get into movies. And to be able to say that we're playing at a festival where John Woo is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and Slash is going to be there to produce, and people like Neil LaBute and Lena Dunham, what an honor to play at such an amazing festival. And also that we're going to have a whole bunch of amazing talents who it just turned out, and we lucked out, all happened to be wrestling within the area around that time the festival's happening, and as well as some of our Montreal-based historians, because at the heart of this film is Pat Patterson, who was an LGBTQ plus wrestling legend, and he was born and raised in Montreal.
Okay. Wow.
One of the things I want to interject here too is I think that some people might scratch their head at the idea of the inclusion of Out in the Ring at a film festival like Fantasia, which is based around the idea of cult followings, things that are horror film fans and all of this. But I wish that people could understand this intersectionality of these different cult followings, things like pro wrestling and even drag and horror. And so I think that it's fantastic. I think that a lot of people may have the opportunity to view this film almost by accident, by being there, and realize how fantastic, number one, the film is, how much they resonate with the content, and how much it also speaks to their kind of own underground love and appreciation for certain genres that might otherwise exclude them as an individual.
Yeah, well put. And that's part of the excitement I was talking about, is that you get with this film, and then Pollo, through your work, you guys have kind of brought to the forefront something that most of us, myself included, had no idea about. I had no idea there was this whole world of pro wrestling and drag. And what I was even telling you before, I grew up with my mom always watching roller derby in the '60s. So when I see some of this, it's like it all kind of blends into this new genre that you guys have kind of spearheaded.
Well, what I find so interesting about the content of Out in the Ring, and a little backstory for you, is that Ry reached out to me almost 5 years ago. And at the time, I was coming off of what I consider a fairly successful career in the world of drag throughout California and along the West Coast. Yeah. As drag was seeing this tremendous resurgence in popularity because of things like RuPaul's Drag Race, right? And at that time, I was shocked that a film producer would be interested in what little contribution I had had at that point. But as this film evolved, and there were a lot of trials and tribulations, I jokingly said we need a documentary about the trials and tribulations of the documentary getting produced. So, because that would be a roller coaster ride of emotions for everyone. Yeah. But during the course of that time, there has been an explosion in popularity and visibility for LGBTQ plus performers and athletes in the world of professional wrestling. So what the film talks about is truly a hidden history of longtime contributions from and involvement of LGBTQ plus people in the world of professional wrestling. And it's juxtaposed against the current state of wrestling, which, while we have a long way to go, in my opinion, to be fully represented, it is better now than it has ever been. And the fan base of people and performers in the world that identify as LGBTQ plus are being celebrated in ways that we have never, ever historically seen.
Yeah. And it's, it's really exciting. I mean, we talk about how I reached out nearly 5 years ago at the time, but what drew me was, again, as a lifelong wrestling fan, I had heard Pollo Del Mar was being interviewed by a wrestler, Austin Idol, on a podcast, and they had written an article for Huffington Post about their own journey with as a member of the community and love of pro wrestling. And the moment I heard that, I reached out, and I had to, and then I did of course, I always do the research to find out, is this person, am I going into interviewing somebody that, maybe, I think knows a little more, and what I couldn't anticipate was just how wonderfully warm and charming and knowledgeable and engaging both Pollo Del Mar and Paul Pratt, because as Pollo Del Mar, the persona, and Paul Pratt, the wrestling journalist, are both two very unique characters. I mean, they both are, they present differently, and they, it's amazing to see both of these personae being able to, be highlighted and celebrated, whether it's as a pundit for wrestling news podcasts or on television now as a character and manager on NWA. I mean, it's so incredible to see, especially in the NWA, which primarily comes from a Southern wrestling history, which has not necessarily been all embracing of the queer community at large.
Yeah,
very definitely true.
Well, Paul, that's the thing, is that's the second part that drew me to you both, which is that you're so good at getting the word out, because if it wasn't for, you're posting on a regular basis, mostly, I see a lot on Twitter, but that's where I kept running into this, like, I kept seeing these events and so forth, and different like poster art. And I'm like, what is going on here? What is all this? And then when I dove deeper, I found that, not only are you involved in this, but you've been in the world of media for probably longer than I have. And so, in fact, our worlds had probably had woven in and out of each other even way back then.
Yes. So people often ask how I got involved in the world of professional wrestling as a performer. And the truth of the matter is that I first got involved behind the scenes and on the scene of world of professional wrestling many, many years ago. And I refuse to tell how many years ago it was exactly, because it would give away my actual age, which is pretty public knowledge, but I'm old and I've been doing this for a long time. I delved into that world when I was in my 20s, and it was not as satisfying as it should have been. For the level of love and passion I have for the world of professional wrestling, it fell very flat for me. And in huge part, that was because of my internal battle to be authentic in a world that I did not think would embrace me. So I put aside the dream of professional wrestling for a long time. And my first love and passion was always journalism. And so I delved into that, and I had a long and fairly prolific and what I consider successful career as that. And probably maybe 10, 12 years ago, my specialty and my focus became celebrity journalism. So I would interview pop stars or television celebrities. And at some point, it occurred to me that, man, professional wrestling personalities are celebrity as well. So why would I not be able to engage in that world? So as one thing led to another, and the more coverage of professional wrestling I was doing, the farther involved I got. And at one point, a local promoter sort of just gave me that opportunity and said, hey, would you like to come out and work with us? And that's how it started for me in a renewed fashion under the name of Pollo Del Mar, as that persona and personality I'd cultivated in the queer community for a number of years. And then by the time Ry discovered me, I was on the cusp, and I feel very good. I want to make it very clear to anybody who's watching or listening to this, I'm far from the star of this show. I'm a talking head, a pundit, somebody who gives some wrestling historical perspective. And Ry shines a real focus and spotlight on people who are truly instrumental in the world of professional wrestling now, in my opinion, and people who historically have been. But one of the great parts for me has been to watch as this film progressed, my own opportunities expand and explode, so that now I feel like very lucky that with the platforms I've been given and the increased visibility that I have, that I can in turn turn that spotlight right back to this film, which is so deserving of that kind of attention and adoration from the public.
Well, that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I have. That's why, like, even meeting you guys here, it's like I feel like I know you already because of all the work you've done so far.
Well, I think we've built a community that it's this being able to have an outlet to share and build upon wrestling fans. I mean, the fans are also part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't, I wish we had a little more in the film of some of the fans. And we do talk to one fan in the film there, out in the ring, about why they were drawn to wrestling. And I think what it speaks to is that for that individual and that specific fan, it was finding something that was different than what they were usually getting presented, and then finding it and then falling in love with it. And I think for many of us, we secretly, and I think still today, secretly we're watching wrestling from I don't know if I should be watching this, and this isn't cool, or this is not. Well, screw that. No, wrestling is badass and cool, and the people in it are cooler than you ever know. I mean, and the fans are equally part of this, because we were both at a wrestling event with over 100 out LGBTQIA plus performers in New Jersey recently, and I'd say a good 25, 30 of those fans that we interact with on Twitter were there as well and had flown in from all over the world. Yeah. My friend from Outsports, who's become one of my best friends, Brian Bell, they were there with their partner, and we had the best time connecting in person, because most of our interactions over the last few years have been like this, not in person. And so it's really in a way, it's really, really perfect timing to come out of this pandemic when we all want to be together, and we're starting to be together to share this communal experience of wrestling with an audience, whether in person as wrestling at live events or through the film's public screening, which is really ultimately the best way to share and experience stories.
I want to just, I feel like I'm nitpicking, but Ry says we only talked to one fan in the film. And I say we just because I'm part of the project and have been for so long. I feel emotionally invested in this at this juncture. Yeah. But I would disagree with that, because I've never met a professional wrestler who is willing to grind on the daily basis that is required for success in this industry, to work for practically free, to put your body on the line, to travel all over the country and get no sleep, who is not doing it in huge part for the love of professional wrestling. We all start out as fans. Yeah. And I think that that's true of any fan base. Going back to the Fantasia thing, I said, there's very few people who are going to commit themselves to like any genre, whether it's music or film or wrestling or anything like that, if they're not a fan. And we talk to all of these people who now have fans of their own, and who have an audience who looks to them as a person in the world of professional wrestling. But every one of us started out as a fan. I mean, we talked about my involvement in the National Wrestling Alliance, and I just debuted a few weeks ago on their television broadcast. And there isn't a day that goes by that, since I was there filming in Nashville, or that I have upcoming filming in St. Louis and Nashville again in the coming month, that I don't sit down and think, oh my God, I get to interact with these, XYZ, like all of these people who I grew up watching as a fan of, and now they're colleagues and mentors. And I'm there being absolutely the person you're seeing sitting in front of you, this flaming homosexual who cross-dresses for success, on a weekly, if not more, basis. And they all seem to accept and appreciate me. So I go into this and I take my fandom with me, and I think that is a big part of what this film is about too, how we had to struggle to find people that we could identify with in past generations. We had to look, read between the lines and find innuendo or things that sometimes were really presented very, very negatively, and cling on to those because that's the best we were going to get, and now we're so fortunate that we live in a society and a day and age in the world of professional wrestling, as is showcased and spotlighted out in the ring, that things are changing for our community, and we are given better role models and people who we can look to for inspiration to hopefully guide a whole new generation to come that want to follow their fandom and love and passion for pro wrestling into the industry itself.
Yeah.
And it's definitely happened a lot. I mean, I'm going to kind of focus on one individual who has parlayed that, and they are incredible, is a young wrestler by the name of Kid Bandit, who has only been in the industry for maybe a year and a half, from training to entry, and they have come out as non-binary and trans-identifying as well, and they have built their own fandom through Twitter, as you've mentioned that you found out about us the same way. It's this building a fandom and this idea of finding yourself represented. And I don't know if it wasn't for trailblazers like Sunny Kiss being trans feminine, gender fluid, or Nyla Rose being an amazing, two-spirit trans woman of color, as an idea for Kid Bandit, who eventually would then come out further about themselves and who they are, and build those personas, and it's just really wonderful for not only just their wrestling persona but their human existence and who they are as a person. One of the things I remember, Effie, one of the amazing wrestlers in the film, who's really moved the needle in terms of queer wrestling over the last 4 or 5 years.
Right? That is an understatement.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
he's a career maker. Effie is a career maker.
Broke the needle off. I mean, in a lot of ways. And Effie said in the film that the only time they feel they're being their true self 100% is in the ring, because the opportunity to utilize every facet of who you are as a person is presented, and it's not always offered in the same way in daily life. I mean, I think there's still parts of us that we hold back on, and it's getting better, but I still think we hold ourselves back a little bit. And in wrestling, there is no holding back anymore. And it's like, no, the doors are gone. We took them right off the hinges, and everybody is able to be themselves in the ring. I mean, I watched an amazing wrestler, Sassy Boatwright, bend a guy over and just go for it. And when we've seen that kind of happen before, it was meant in a mocking way. In this way, it was meant to be a tactic of dominance and comedy and everything, but it didn't feel the way it used to when it was two heterosexual men and one of them was just there to make fun and intimidate. This was about, I'm going to give it to you, you're going to like it, and then being able to, and it feels different. So we've not only taken those things that we use to mock and humiliate or attempt to humiliate us, and we've taken, and this generation of new wrestlers has grabbed that and said, no, in our hands, we control this narrative, and as fans, we control the narrative, and no. So now wrestling really, truly is for everybody.
Yeah, the things that were once used to emasculate and diminish are now taken back by the people, the entertainers themselves, and used in many ways to empower and embolden, right? Like Sassy Boatwright could get it. Sassy Boatwright's got strong masculine energy and is hilarious. Love Sassy.
Well, I could see why you know this project has come to life through the two of you. It's the passion you both have that comes through loud and clear, is the passion you have for this project and the world that you're a part of there.
I think we've sat on the fringes for so long, and now we're, and it was important at the time when I wanted to tell the story, and I was struggling to find 5 years ago 9 out wrestlers that I could speak to, and or individuals who were out in the industry, and so cut to now, we've got at least 500 out performers in various levels from around the world, and more promotions coming up every opportunity, and it's getting better. But we're in such difficult political times right now globally, that this message that we've presented in an industry that's been exclusionary to a fault is now is a really great lens to explore so much more in terms of politics and gender identity and cultural appropriation. There's just, wrestling really has that richness and has always had it.
I think that one of the things that distinguishes the industry now for LGBTQ representation is that, as with any marginalized community, there have been times throughout history when, let's say, a large company has wanted to show inclusionary practices. That has always meant bring in one of whatever that might be. And there was a time, honestly, when it was women and they would bring in 2 because, of course, it's wrestling. So you had to have 2 people to fight. And so they'd bring in 2 to show the representation or whatever. And with LGBTQ people, that has often been the case. Many people were fighting, maybe not even many people, a few people were fighting for one spot. And quite often we would get the same kind of concepts replicated over and over again. And if, historically speaking, you will find that. You will find watered down versions of one in another and another. And in the world of professional wrestling now, there are so many different gender identities and sexual identities and presentations of each of those that we can fill entire pro wrestling cards with professional wrestlers who fall under the umbrella of LGBTQ plus, and you will not see a character repetition among any of us, because those characters are now allowed to be as unique as the individuals who are playing those characters. And so I applaud the effort that we have now and what we are able to do in the world of professional wrestling now. And I think it's one of the things that, as I was saying, when juxtaposed against the content of this film, Out in the Ring gives this really historic, rich look at where we were not terribly long ago. I mean, people think that, yes, 20 years seems like a long time, or 40 years seems like a long time, but there are many people who that's been within their lifetime, and they were probably not terribly young people when they were watching some of that content. So that is a rapid progression for what we're seeing in the world of wrestling. And I think that wrestling has always been a microcosm in many ways of the fights and battles that greater society is having. And we capture some of that in this film as well, because it has been a true struggle for a lot of people to go decades without being able to be authentic to even the people who are closest to them in this business. And it's heartbreaking, really, really, truly heartbreaking.
Well put. And no, I love all this. And for anybody who's been watching, what we're going to make sure is that in the links, especially on YouTube, we're going to have links to not only all your social media, some articles we found, but also the Vimeo trailer. And so the Vimeo trailer is it's like 2.5 minutes, and it really allows folks to get a better sense of exactly what this film is all about. And
yeah, and just a shout out. I mean, that trailer was cut by our amazing editor, Brad Webb. And Brad came on not only as an editor, but eventually became a producer, because Brad basically did the work of 3 editors over a period of 2 years, and went on out on his own. As a wrestling fan, I mean, he was interested, but he became a researcher in so many ways, in finding clips and photos and images that, I was actively looking for, but then I'd see the edit or a rough cut and go, where did you find that? Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know. I just Googled it up, and, it came up on there. And then, so to find so much of this content, and then, to go from 45 hours of interviews and at least 45 hours of B-roll and photos, to get to an hour and 45 minutes where we are, and still feel like in a way that I'm only just scratching the surface of what this is a testament to Brad's skill as an editor, his genuine love of this project. And I think not one person involved in this, people outside of the fandom of wrestling, to those who are part of the industry, those who were fans coming to work on the film, are now bigger fans, or if they weren't fans, are now fans of pro wrestling. My friend came to the world premiere and said to me the other day that he's caught himself now watching and seeking out wrestling documentaries. Yeah. And so genuine interest in the industry, because I don't think people understand how fascinating the industry of wrestling is in terms of its machinations and territories and independent promotions and contracts. And it's really wrestling as Pollo and Paul have said, is a microcosm of a larger global issue around, the battle between good and evil, and gay and straight, and xenophobia and racism and sexism. And it's better now than it was, but it was really bad at times. And there were many people who put a lot of risks on the line. Bad. I think of somebody like Jim Barnett, who was basically the biggest power player, one of the biggest power players in pro wrestling in the 60s, was out his entire career in wrestling and was one of the most respected industry people. And to be able to tell people, it was like, yeah, he was out in the 60s. Susan Green was out in the 70s. Chris Colt was out and wrestling actively in the 70s. And it wasn't an open secret thing where people knew you were actually out. And in terms of a Chris Colt or Jim Barnett, it's incredible. These people deserve to be remembered and highlighted. And these new performers like Dark Sheik and Sonny Kiss and Billy Dixon, just incredible human beings who deserve to have their stories told, because everybody's got an individual story that is so unique to them. And I think the more and more times that we focus on unearthing hidden histories in places where we as a community have not been welcomed, we make it okay for other people to speak out and say who they are. And that's ultimately the goal now, is if you were a wrestling fan and you didn't want to let anybody know that you were a member of the community, now you have people to look to. Yeah. And you don't even need the straight presenting wrestling, because in a lot of ways there is a whole separate industry of wrestling that just is for you now. Yeah. If you wanted to treat it that way. But it is really is for everyone.
It's time to come out, darling.
Yes.
I love this.
We're waiting for you.
Well, mostly I'm so glad that you guys were able to kind of share not only a bit of your story, but share this bigger story as far as with our audience, with folks that I think that there's going to be a whole newfound love for a lot of the things that you talked about here. And like I said, I think it's important that folks have a chance to be able to see this film as well.
And if you're in Montreal on the 26th of July, you can come and meet Sonny Kiss, Danny Jordan, and Big Mike Perro, and Pat Patterson's biographer, Bertrand Hébert, will be there. And then some other wrestlers who have been great allies. One of our favorite wrestlers in the world, who's just been an amazing ally, is an amazing woman by the name of Lufisto. And that she's going to be there in Montreal. And she was one of the groundbreaking, her own story. There's a documentary about her and a book coming out about her through another person who's in our film, Greg Oliver. And Lufisto was the first person to fight to have the right to have intergender matches in professional wrestling. And she wasn't allowed. So she knows this fight. She knows the fight from her side of it, and being able to say, no, I can beat up a man, screw him. And she does easily. Hands down, tougher than anybody. And then in the Bay Area, Pollo and I and our producer, editor, Brad Webb, and possibly some other guests will be there at Cinequest in San Jose on August 21st. We're really excited. More and more festivals are upcoming, and the more, we want to bring people to the cult of wrestling in a lot of ways, and hope that people understand how special it is.
Fantastic.
Matt, one of the things I wanted to say about this is I made a conscious decision. Of course, like I said, I've been doing drag for many, many years, and I had a fairly strong social media following, and I made a decision a couple of years ago that I was going to become unabashedly a pro wrestling fan on my social media. And it was a risk because I know that there are people who are my day-to-day friends in real life. They see me around town or whatever, and they are undoubtedly scratching their heads like, this bitch has lost her mind. Like, she's gone off the rails. But it has connected me with this tremendous audience of people who share the passion that I do for pro wrestling, who also love and appreciate my drag. And I thought it was such a risk, in a way, because people do not expect that combination. And there'll be people, for example, on, when Twitter suggests my tweet to people, they'll look and they'll see it's about wrestling. And then they may click on my profile and they're like, what in the hell have I stumbled onto? Right. What is this rabbit hole?
Yeah.
But I was walking through the Castro district here in San Francisco the other day, and I ran into one of my longtime friends, and they said, "Oh, girl, you are killing it in the world of wrestling. We can't stop talking about it. Everybody's talking about, you constantly getting thrown through a door or getting beat up or, whatever. I had my tooth knocked out very recently. But, what it shows me is that when we are open about, it's just like being out, right? When we are open about what it is we love, who we are, what we love, and what our passions are, the people around us become very curious. So I think that when people who are unexpected wrestling fans share that love with other people, it can bring even more people to the table who might fall in love completely unexpectedly. I mean, I tweeted this morning, sometimes I wonder if I should try out for Drag Race again, because I think that I could put a lot of eyes on pro wrestling and create a lot of unexpected fans because of this kind of intermeshing of things that people love. If you love the show person element of drag, then you will presumably love the show person element of pro wrestling, the drama, the crazy antics, all of it's there. And it's very, very similar. So if anybody's watching or listening and you love drag, but you've never given wrestling a shot, I think you might want to reconsider. I mean, they have fierce robes, honey. Fierce robes.
Oh, the makeup. Jeez. I mean, the costumes. I mean, listen, just alone watching Sonny Kiss's ring entrance will carry you everywhere in this world. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, and the interesting you mentioned that Paul mentions is that Drag Race now in the last year has brought up wrestling in a topic on the show, but they've dabbled with it before, because in, I think, season 3 or 4, they did a Was it 4? It was 4.
I think it was 4.
Yeah, it was pre-Jinx. Yeah. So, and we still even know about the show, and we don't, we're not as embedded in it as we are. But they did a wrestling competition. I mean, so there is, it's the same. It really is the same with the extent with this. But I think wrestlers are even bigger characters because they have that much more to overcome in terms of convincing people.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. I really thank you both for being here. And since you're talking about those film festivals and so forth, I look forward to being able to connect in the real world sometime soon. So I get out and about as well.
Yay.
But thanks again. Matt. And I look forward to catching up here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.
So good.